Well, welcome to another episode of the Carlos Taco Show. I'm your host, Carlos Tacos, along with Miss Patty. We got Ricardo Black. We got Andrew Becker in the house. Miss Patty, take it away. What are we doing tonight?
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our space. Tonight, let's talk about the environment that we live in. We
Nice.
live in a really, we live in an amazing location
Hmm.
geographically. And I got this thing in the mail recently, and I want to talk about this
Okay.
recycling in our local community, the history behind the lands, outdoor recreational parks. We're going to talk about projects and the impact on the environment. We have some amazing guest speakers today. I'd love to introduce Mr. Ricardo Black, y'all. I met this very educated and knowledgeable community member years ago during one of my it was a bio class. We did a tour at Black Diamond Mines, and Ricardo went on to teach us about the trails, the history behind it, the natural resources that were used. So lots of knowledge here. And then go ahead, Ricardo, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us about yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you, Patty. It's good to see you. It's been a while, but yeah, my name's Ricardo Black. I've been, uh, I guess, enamored by plants and botany in general since towards the end of my high school. But yeah, I live in Oakley. I've been active in my community via Los Medanos College. I was there for like 7 years. Just originally trying to get my chemistry major, which I did get my associates in chemistry, biology, and math. But I ended up transferring to UC Davis, where I got my bachelor's for environmental science management with a focus on soils and biogeochemistry. So, all about the land, because if you want to grow any plant, whatever it is, it's all about where you're growing it. As long as you have a good soil, you could grow anything. But yeah, currently I'm working part time with the Los Medanos Nature Preserve still. So I became very attached to that little garden. It's roughly 2 acres, and there's a lot going on there in terms of California native ecology, which is kind of like also my focus of interest. And we could delve into those reasons throughout the show. But yeah, and most recently in January, I got my newest full-time job with the John Muir Land Trust, and
Nice.
my position there is manager of stewardship and public outreach and engagement. So again, it's building that gap between people and nature, and how to take care of the land and involve the community to achieve that. Because there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of people out there that I know are passionate about their community and would love to go out and help out in nature. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Excited to have
Mm,
you. Hey,
Thank
Nice.
you.
quick, there's some sound issues that I'm hearing. Is it just me?
No, no. Somebody's like, they're probably trying to watch it while they're on. You just got to turn your volume off. That's all, or lower your volume.
Okay.
Whoever's watching themselves. And welcome
The
in,
stream.
Catherine Wade.
Thank you. No, that we have a lot of that was beautiful. We're gonna jump into all of those topics. Ricardo, remember to jump back in. Um, Andrew Becker, another introduction, y'all. Andrew Becker is a huge advocate. He shows up to the city council meetings, and if it's anything about property and land and funding for housing, and Andrew Becker is our subject matter expert, I think, on potential projects. And so, Andrew, if you want to drop a little nugget of yourself and what you'll be bringing to the conversation tonight.
Thanks, Patty. Yes, so thank you. My name is Andrew Becker, an affordable housing developer and advocate for our unhoused locally and regionally. I work to bring multifamily affordable housing mixed with market rate and multifamily and single family models here to the region, that are also tied to capital improvement projects. So really just working to create spaces that bring support and affordability, most importantly, to our community. Um, Definitely excited to be here tonight and to be a part of this conversation. That was quite an introduction there, Ricardo. So definitely excited to hear, what's happening here regionally. Would definitely love to speak with you offline as well. One of our projects we're working on is actually a land bank mitigation project here in the Bay Area and the Delta specifically. And so, I think that tying these development projects to community-based organizations as well as local trusts. I apologize for the background as well. My cat is just started to wake up from his all-day nap, and so
It's all good.
I also, as Patty said, show up to a lot of council meetings and try to stay informed in what's happening locally. And hope to kind of touch on some of that as well later on tonight too. So thank you.
Nice.
Sweet. And Miss Catherine Wade joined us, community advocate, community voice, Mama Wade. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about environment and recycling and the lands around us. Welcome back to the show. We love having you.
Yes.
Thank you. I really want to learn more about the environment and how I can start me some gardens.
Right.
I want to grow me some fruits and vegetables and some food. Yeah. So thank you. And I want to learn about the environment. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. And then we have Frank Sterling. He will be jumping on about halfway through the show, and he has some knowledge on local lands and whatnot. So let's get started. Right? So a little bit about the Delta in Antioch. Antioch and the Delta that we have, it's one of about 1,500 estuaries. So what makes it unique is we have this fresh water coming from the mountains, goes to the Delta, and it meets our salt water. So that makes it an estuary and unique. With that, there's an ecosystem we fish from, we drink from. A lot of water is recycled. I do believe that anything we put out into the universe comes back. So recycling and I guess our methods of how we categorize everything is going to have an impact long term. So the sooner we can get on board with just getting with the new recycling program, the better. Ricardo knows a lot about the original lands and the original peoples. Ricardo, would you like to school us a bit about the Bay Miwok people?
Sure. I know a little bit about the indigenous cultures, yeah. But I guess to grasp a little bit more and to go a little more in depth of what you said, California does have a very unique climate. In fact, there's a very small percentage of the world that has what we have, not only climate-wise and geographically, and we fall into a biome called chaparral. And chaparral, Spanish, when the Spanish came here, they kind of saw the landscape with short bushes. They didn't grow that big in certain areas around where we live, so they kind of called it chaparral. And what it is really is a place where there's cold, wet winters and hot, dry summers. That's kind of like the basic key way. And what that does is it creates a very special place for different plants to evolve, for drought tolerance, for fire resiliency, and yeah, and a lot of the plants serve for food, resources, and medicine, which is what nourished for thousands of years a lot of the native cultures that were in California. And if we're talking about just California, the state, it had one of the most densely populated areas of native cultures, and it wasn't just one, it was many cultures. Kind of think of it how California has different cities, and you could drive around, like I could go from Oakley to Antioch to Martinez. There was different tribes all along the bay where you could do that. They had different languages which were grouped together by, again, the Spanish when they came here. So you might hear Miwok or Ohlone or Yokuts. A lot of these names weren't specific to the true identity of the indigenous peoples, but they were linguistically grouped together. So the Miwoks, they kind of categorized a whole bunch of tribes from the area and called them Miwok, and then Ohlone similar. Today, there's still Miwoks, Ohlone peoples, but because a lot of the changes that happened with California becoming a state, the Spanish and Mexico era, there was a lot of changes, and those changes in the land, I think, is what slowly completely changed the culture of how we live in the state. And I think that's kind of where we need to focus on the solutions in modern times. Like, we know the cultural changes started from the land, so now we gotta fix it by starting healing the land, which is kind of where knowing your ecological knowledge of the native plants that grow around you is really important. Because for example, if I go to Home Depot and I buy a whole bunch of plants, a lot of those plants are not going to be food for the bees. They're not going to be um, host plants for a lot of our native butterflies that are very picky eaters, and they only lay their eggs in certain plants. And then if you go to a California native nursery and get some California native plants, you're feeding the pollinators, hummingbirds, butterflies, the over 4,000 native bees that we have in the West Coast. So the point is, there's a higher ecological output of being conscious about the plants that you're planting compared to planting just something that's not native. And again, you could really see this mirrored in our society, because a lot of our ecological challenges come from introduced invasive species. So you have people from all over the world. They're coming to California around the time where they found out that there was gold. So as any person immigrating from their home, you want to bring a little piece of home with you, right? So a lot of these people are bringing the medicines they know from their homeland. And when they come here, they create a shift in balance of the ecology. And the shift in balance is what we're, as environmentalists and people that care about nature, that's where we're struggling. How do we reach a balance where these invasive species aren't harming our soils and our native ecology, and how do we reverse back to what was once before, which is very difficult, as we can see looking around.
Through education. Education is key.
Yeah.
Right,
Education.
There's two. Go ahead, Carlos.
Right. I'm sorry. I had a question. You mentioned about the bees and stuff. Is there truly a shortage? Because I'm seeing an increase in pollen now. I mean, cars are like packed with it more than usual. Is that rumor about a shortage in bees? Is that true?
I think it's misunderstood. So when it comes to bees, they do need pollen. A lot of it is for reproduction. They feed it to their larvae babies, and then they also get honey. But the ones that we know, the European honeybees, they are not going extinct, because we as humans grow them. Like, beekeepers will grow queen bees and commercially, industrially sell boxes for a lot of the farmers, especially in industrial farms, when they're growing acres and acres of trees that need pollination. They need extra bees, so they will purchase the honeybee boxes and the queens. When it comes to the native bees, and again, we're talking about over 4,000 species. That's different species. They could be solitary, which means they don't live in a hive like the honeybees that we know. Some can live like the carpenter bee. They literally crunch through wood. They make a hole with their jaws, and then they live in the wood. They put their eggs and stuff like that. So a lot of them are endangered. Those native bees are endangered. The honeybees aren't. And a lot of it has to do with pesticide use. A lot of the pesticides sometimes have negative effects to other insects, including the honeybees that they use, and habitat loss. So a lot of development erases or completely eradicates habitat that a lot of these insects depended on. So it makes sense when you kill the food of these insects, there's going to
Right.
be less. So that's it's kind of yes and no of them going extinct. The honeybees will be okay.
Okay. Now, there's two places that we could learn even more about the species in our local community here. That is the east, that is Big Break Shoreline. There's an East Bay something center there. And there's also Black Diamond Mines. That's also another center of knowledge. I highly recommend if you live in Antioch, Oakley, Pittsburgh, go to Big Break, check out their indoor species environmental. It's all about the plants and animals and wildlife, and then also Black Diamond Mines. Is there anything else that we could learn about in those two locations? Did I miss another place, Ricardo?
Well, I think the East Bay Regional Park District is a great agency. I was lucky enough to work for them for 4 years, and at Black Diamond. And there's a whole bunch of parks all over Contra Costa and Alameda that serve as a really good gateway to nature. They do a really good job at making that accessible. And Big Break is great if you want to learn about the Delta. They have a visitor center. It's very interactive.
Nice.
Black
And it's
Diamond
free. It's free.
Free.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good
free
price.
resources. It's really nice. It's pretty new. It's one of their newest facilities. And then Black Diamond Mines, they do mine tours. They do guided walks. It's also a really close park where you could go. And of course, Los Medanos, the nature preserve. You could also volunteer there. We're doing one this Saturday if you want to check it out. It's from 9 to 2. We're going to be out there. There's a club called the Hyphae Club that I helped found when I was a student. And the Hyphae Club the name comes from a part of the mushroom. So there's a part of the mushroom that's called hyphae. And we thought because, the whole hyphae movement, it would kind of like pick up. And we envision it kind of like the mycelium, the mushroom, that grows and expands and connects, talks to plants and does all these exchanges. We're kind of embodying that mycelium and hyphae. We're taking all our knowledge, our nutrients, and kind of nourishing all of our peers by sharing and making a safe space to talk about these things, because we can make a difference. A lot of times people are like, well, climate change, there's all these issues. What am I going to do? I'm just one person. Well, you can do a big difference. Like I plant certain, I threw a whole bunch of seeds last year, and this month they started to bloom, and I saw bees on them. And I was like, if I didn't do that, that bee wouldn't have had its lunch. So like, you can make a difference, even if it's small. And if we all collectively start shifting, we can really, really start seeing changes in our environment and our natural spaces.
I love it.
Nice.
Hey, what you said about hyphae forever. I hope hyphae will never die.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I went to Black Diamond, the trail. I went for a walk with some friends. We could talk about the trails next. And there was this family of mushrooms coming out of the soil. And I stood there and watched them, and I watched them literally exhale. It was like they kept inhaling and exhaling, and I could see the carbon
Oh, wow.
dioxide, right? And because it was kind of cold, but I could see it in the air. It was like
Mm,
it was a trip. It was like we were communicating. Like I knew they were there. They knew I was there.
I ain't never seen a
yeah.
mushroom.
It was a trip. It was cool. It was really cool.
Yeah,
So they
it sounds like you saw the mushroom because what we see, that fruiting body, it's the
Mhm,
way it reproduces. So
mhm,
mushrooms are really cool because they're not plants and they're not animals. They're their own kind of organism.
mhm.
And unlike plants, they don't have seeds, they have spores. And they're
Mm.
tiny, like you need a microscope to really see them. They're more like almost like pollen. And when that fruiting body matures, you'll see it kind of just drop those spores. And
Mm.
it's kind of like what you described. It kind of looks like it's breathing. It's
There was
reproducing.
air coming out of the soil. You could see the movement of,
Oh,
That's dope.
you know, when
yeah,
when it's
mushrooms are
cold
really
and you
cool.
go, and you could see your breath. It was like that.
Whoa.
I tried to record it, but it wasn't enough. Okay, so speaking of trails, y'all, there's a lot of trails around Antioch, Oakley, and they're awesome to walk. If you follow um, Lean In with the Kings, Miss Dominique King and her family, they really got me going on the trails again. And
Nice.
we all can take care of our health and use our local trails to go about biking, hiking, walking. There's some poetry walks that are happening in our community. ¿Qué más? Anything else y'all want to add about the trails?
There's Round Valley in Brentwood, which is also an East Bay Regional Park. And if you're venturing out towards Martinez, there's a few properties of John Muir Land Trust. So there's if you've been to John Muir's house in Martinez, that's actually a state park you could check out. Lots of history there. On the other side, you could hike up Mount Wanda, which is named after one of John Muir's daughters. And you could venture out into a whole bunch of properties like Almond Ranch, Guston, Dutra. They're all properties purchased by the John Muir Land Trust to create a green corridor for animals and for public to kind of use. And they're really fun trails. There's lots and lots of wildflowers starting to bloom, and it's pretty early, so it's really interesting to get out there. But those are awesome hikes. Fernandez Ranch is also one that was new to me this year, and it's beautiful. If you like Black Diamond, I think you'll like Fernandez Ranch too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up Martinez, and Miss Wade wants to learn how to farm and wants to grow her own plants and trees. And
Mhm.
if you drive around Antioch, there are orange trees, lemon trees, pomegranate trees, nopales. We live in a really interesting place. I love that. Martinez has a farming place. So Mama Wade, maybe one of these days, our groups, our friends in the community, we can go donate some time to the local farm. It's called Coco Sustainable Farms. And I visited that farm about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was all soil. There wasn't anything planted yet. They were in the works. They had just got the contract with the county, I believe, to use the recycled water from that water plant, use the soil, use the something to make and grow vegetables and fruits for our communities. So I'll check out their website. Do you all know anything about the Coco Sustainable Farm?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Haven't heard of it? Okay. If I'm not mistaken, they donate a lot of their greens to local charities. But they have an Instagram, and they do look for volunteers, and that's one of our local. Oh, you could also donate. So their mission is to create a sustainable and just community that promotes food equity, protects the environment, educates and promotes economic development. So Loaves of Fishes
Nice.
is one of the benefiting nonprofits. They provide free, sustainably grown produce to soup kitchens, schools, the food bank, and other nonprofits. They have donated 100,000 plus pounds to the communities around us. So check them out, Coco Sustainable Farm. I love what they have become over
Where are they based out of?
Martinez.
Nice. Okay.
So if you're going from Antioch to Martinez, it's on the right hand side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could,
I
you
have,
know,
yeah, I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of a farm in Pittsburgh, which is
Mm.
also part of the JMLT, the John Muir Land Trust. It's the Family Harvest Farm. It's a pretty new farm as well, and they take apprenticeships. They focus a lot on helping foster youth, giving them the skills and abilities to go out into the world and be prepared for a career. And yeah, if you want to learn how to farm, you could volunteer. Mary there, who's amazing, she'll teach you all about composting, farming, and yeah, it's all about your soil. If you want to grow anything, like if you want to grow a pear tree, just search up, like what does the pear like? Like where does it usually grow? What conditions of soil does it need? And it's usually pretty easy once you get the hang of it.
and the time of the year to plant it too, right? Is important. I think my
Yeah.
dad tried to plant something and they all like died. Like maybe it was bad timing.
Yeah, so in our area, in the summertime is the worst time to plant because it's really hot and dry. So if you're not constantly watering it, a not established plant will most likely perish, even if it's a native plant. You want to ideally plant them either in fall, whatever you're planting, or in spring, unless it's an annual plant. So an annual plant is, or a crop is something that you start from seed, it grows in 1 year, in one season, it gives its yield, and then it dies.
Mm.
So a lot of those are dependent on the seasons, which is usually springtime. You could have spring and summer crops, and then you could have winter crops. Usually winter crops, because there's less light, you get more lettuces, green leafy greens, compared to like tomatoes, which need a lot of sun, which you don't get in the winter time, and it's cold for a lot of these plants, so they'll probably just die. So yeah,
Mm.
timing and making sure they're established and the soil is well fed. You want to feed your soil. Think of it as a living thing, and then you're feeding it organic things, so it could feed your plants.
Sweet. Thank you for that. Andrew Becker, let's switch it over to you. Where can we develop a community farm, like an amazing community something? Tell us about potential projects. What do you have for us?
So, it's been amazing just listening to the conversation, a lot of information. And I'll tell you, growing up here in California in the San Francisco Bay Area, and specifically the Delta region, um, it's really so amazing because we see the diversity in the people is matched equally, if not more, through the different geographic locations here, right? That are regional as well as through the state. I think that's amazing that we're probably one of the few states where you could drive 2 hours in any direction and be in really a completely different climate and atmosphere, right? And historically, I think um, that attractive climate and all of the natural resources that California has to offer has led to the really degradation that we've seen throughout the state, right? Over now centuries. And you know we look back to 1862 and the Great Flood that happened here in California and in the Sacramento, specifically region area where all of those tributaries just overflowed and completely overtook the area, right, that was just starting to flourish in agricultural growth, right? And how did we react? We could have said this is a larger force, a power that's bigger than us as people, and we could respect that, or we could take advantage of the marginalized community that was up there building the Transcontinental Railroad and bring them down. And those are all of the levees that we see along the Delta region now were built by those individuals. And the agricultural growth continued right into the early 1900s. And so a lot of us now that have seen the growth in the Bay Area, and we attribute it to the real estate and housing boom that overtook the California as a whole and the nation, through the boomer era, or we could attribute it to more recently to the technological advancements and all of that comes from the Bay Area. But really, a lot of people don't know that just here in Brentwood, that was the capital for asparagus growth on the West Coast. And that asparagus was going down to that Antioch Marina, that pier down there. All those pylons that we see sticking out of the water were the canneries. Tom Trust property there was a cannery. And all of this agricultural growth required what? Water. And so water has always been something big here in the state of California, right? And talking about the Delta and its really uniqueness that is really one of, I think, only maybe 2 or 3 throughout the entire world. These tributaries that feed into the Delta, the Sacramento and the San Joaquin, together equal over 500 miles of water travel. The Sacramento River comes all the way from the Sierras up in Shasta County, and the San Joaquin River actually travels north through California and comes to us here in the Delta. For a period, it drops beneath the water table. It goes underground and travels through underground aquifers and then comes back in. This is something that is so beautiful and so original, right? And how do we respond? We bring these housing projects, and through the 60s, we build this massive aquifer where we divert all of that water to Southern California where there is no water. Or for all of us that drive down 5 to go to Los Angeles, we see these miles and miles of walnut, areas where that historically was Lake Tulare that was taken away because of that agricultural growth throughout the state. And so, I guess the reason I say all of this is because now we look at the region, which had such agricultural growth and abundance, and was such a piece of history for the community and the region. And we have these few urban infill areas where we have these pop-ups. But even speaking to that one in Pittsburgh, that's out on the previous Stoneman Army base, right? And so out there, that was the range. That was downrange. That's where they were shooting off munitions for years and testing. And meanwhile, we have Kimball Island, which is just right across from the Antioch Marina, is an island here that was held by the Kimball family for generations, stayed within a family trust for over 100 years. Half of it was put into a land bank for mitigation. And for those who don't know what a land bank for mitigation is, those are terms within a developer space. So when a builder comes in and builds somewhere, there's an environmental analysis that is done that says, this is the effects that your development would have on these environmental species or this area that you're going to build out of. And so a developer has to either mitigate on site or, and this is a crazy thing to think, they can actually buy credits in another location. They can mitigate somewhere else and they can apply those credits to that development. So you could potentially eradicate that specific area's species right there, or seriously injure it, but you can apply credits from another development that was done 100 miles away. And so that's what half of Kimball Island is that land bank for those mitigation credits for projects that took place throughout the state. And the other half is currently on the market right now for $900,000. And it's zoned for farming and agricultural growth as well as recreational uses. So believe it or not, the zoning is already in place there to create a recreation space for the youth or marginalized communities, at-risk communities, and tie it to agricultural growth, sustainability, education on site here in our Delta for $995,000. But people don't know, and so that listing has been online for 2 years. I'm trying to
Oh.
get people to come up with money for it, but
Hmm.
it's frustrating because these are the different opportunities that are here locally, and we can kind of bring back some of that history. But unfortunately, priorities are elsewhere, right? And so even looking at that agricultural growth here, speaking to some of Ricardo's points and Patty's points earlier, we have indigenous peoples here that we're living off of this land. And so, we're in a space where, we have to acknowledge all of history and what has taken place. But we also have to, I don't want to go into a space where we're saying let's look at how amazing this this farming and this growth and all of this was out here. That was, the forming of Antioch and Pittsburgh was, we purchased land from John Marsh, which was Rancho Los Maganos, which he was given from the United States president Ulysses S. Grant. But the question is, what authority was it for Grant to give that land to him? Who was it for this white man to come in and just take this land from all of the people that were there and give it away to everyone else? And so now we look at all of that agricultural growth and industry that was built there. It was built on stolen land, and we say it over and over and over again. So, I appreciate all of the efforts, and I don't want to take away from people's families and work that they've done. But if they sow that land, and they reap those benefits, and they won't acknowledge the atrocities that those are atrocities, in my opinion, that took place in stealing people's lands. It's a fine line. So I apologize. I know I could be a bit long-winded when I speak, but
No, I learned quite a few things. Love having you.
good.
No, that was a lot of knowledge that was just dropped right now. I'm processing it. Because it is stolen land. And I see a solution. I mean, if they were to make that into a farming space and then they could create some fun transportation for the youth to go on over to the island and do farming and agricultural studies, that would be a beautiful program for our community.
I think so.
Yeah. Dang. So then, I'm curious, like, if somebody has credit somewhere and they know that they're gonna kill like a lot of species in that terrain, they can use the credits from another location to like pay it back, kind of thing.
Yeah, and so, we think of that as just what's crazy is that we are fighting these battles not just against the people, right? We think of the capitalistic society as these private investors that want to come in and they don't care what they tear down to get where they're going, right? I'll give you an example. One of the largest projects, one of the largest environmental reviews. I apologize, that my background. One of the largest environmental reviews that is that is going on right now in California is the environmental review for the high-speed rail project that they have planned from Los Angeles to San Francisco. And they have the high-speed rail that's going from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
Okay.
That's the long-term plan. Right now, they have it going from Bakersfield to Merced. but eventually they want to bring it through Los Banos and then Pacheco Pass out there where the San Luis Reservoir is, and they want to tunnel all the way through those hills. But they found in the environmental review that to do that, they could potentially cause the potential extinction for 2 species that are native to that area. And so what does the government do? Instead of diverting and looking for other opportunities, they start to figure out what are mitigative measures. And mitigative measures are, well, maybe we can help another species somewhere else. And so, yeah, and so that's the balance that some of these laws are, and that's the trouble that some of these environmental lobbyists are the hurdles that they're up against, because it's not a question of what is right or wrong. It's really, for a lot of these politicians and these laws, what's the middle ground, right? And the middle ground typically means that someone somewhere is going to get hurt. So
Collateral damage ish.
and what are the rewards, right, for people to be able to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles on a train?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do we want to jump into recycling? Has anybody gotten this sheet yet? You got it, Andrew? Ricardo?
I live in Oakley, so I don't get that Antioch stuff.
Okay, so Antioch is putting out a really big recycling plan. And from my experience, like I was in Germany over 11 years ago, and they were doing this already. Over 11 years ago, they were separating landfill from recyclable, compost. There was a 4th one. It was like paper, plastic, compost, something else. But Antioch is implementing this now. And so I think at some point they might, I don't see anything about fines, but it's important to get to know how to separate recyclables. My mom taught me since I was really little to cut the little plastics in the soda can.
Yeah.
That was, and so I give so much credit to my mama for being the one champion this in the household and making sure that we do this, because it does take time, but it also minimizes the amount of things going in our trash, like breaking down the box, breaking down papers, and yeah, it's a lot. So landfill, recycle, plastics, papers, and compost.
Yeah, you know, Patty, if I could quickly say something, I would say that, I completely agree with you. It's very important. And, that all comes down from state legislative actions, once again, that took place that demanded that local municipalities do that. So that's why you see it specifically coming out from the city of Antioch through Republic, right? Because they contract their garbage services through Republic. And so, the frustrating thing is that it's all about accountability, right? Like, and compliance. And here in Antioch, if there is not that overall education around these proactive environmental stances, or really just where we're supposed to be at, then there's like an ignorance, right? And people don't understand, and so people just stay stuck in the same kind of basic, and you don't see people following those rules. And so what it does come down to is people literally going out and checking garbage cans on garbage days and then finding people. That's literally what they're supposed to do. And in Antioch, I mean, they're struggling to keep track of the stolen cars, right? Let's just be honest. So, I don't know, all of a sudden, and this is a strong leap, but to be honest with you, if it was any other city, I might not say it, but Antioch, these once again can just become tools for targeting communities, to be honest with you. You know, all of a sudden you can start targeting multifamily communities, you know, high density single family communities that are lower income, and it stems around education. A lot of these people, you know, like that live out in like multifamily communities, they just go carry their garbage out to one garbage receptacle, right? Like they're not staying on top of what we're supposed to be doing or what you're supposed to be doing. And so, you know, if the city isn't educating people or the community isn't educating people, and then it does come down, if people show up to check, which they probably won't, but if they do, yeah, I just worry that it's going to be another tool. So, you know, I hope that's not too strong a leap, but
I feel what you're saying. I felt that too. It's like, oh, another way to criminalize families that don't have time to really get down to understanding the differences of the different landfills, recycling items. So yeah, educating our community, but I see what you mean. Like it is one of those ways that, well, let's criminalize folks that are not doing it right, because yeah, HB or SB 1383 will require folks to monitor, like you said. People are going to be checking on how we're doing, but it's a thing. It's in process. I think I don't know how long of this is a long-term plan. I don't think that they'll be finding anyone yet, but we could prepare for it. That's probably their end goal, to motivate people to do the separation. And there are families that live in a single family homes that are multiple. Like I have neighbors, and they have a lot of, you know, trash, and sometimes I help. I'll put in what they have into our bins just so it's not spilling over.
yeah, I mean, what if you literally are renting a room in a single family home? Like if you don't have that strong of a communication with your landlord, you know, I mean, are people really going to be saying, hey, this is the breakdown, this is where the bin is in this house, so all of a sudden you're throwing it into this bin, and then people are like, well, that's a one in every other situation. Well, we got 114,000 people here in the city of Antioch, so all of a sudden that, and the majority of that is single family homes where a lot of people are renting. So, you know, you put that all together and it can kind of lead to a lot of oversight. And, you know, at the end of the day, like the city has these monthly dumping down at the Pruitt Park, which they like never advertise, but I don't know why they're down there on that end of town allowing free dumping, but it's not on the other side of town ever. Um, but if you go down there, that would be an opportunity for these kinds of postings, or even having a booth that is like, as people are dumping, you're stopping people and saying, hey, this is a new law that's going to be implemented. None of that was ever there. It's always just a single mailer that goes out, and then people, yeah, exactly, are left to try to figure it out. So
Wow.
That would be a way to do things to educate our community. Legit. That should have been part of the plan. It should still be. ¿Qué más? We have about 15 more minutes, 12 more minutes to cover environmental justice in our communities. What do y'all think about those plants that are over there in Pittsburgh and all the fumes that come out of it? Does it go out into the atmosphere? Does it come back down on our people? Are we going to have long-term effects from it? What do y'all think?
I guess it
yeah.
depends. Yeah.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah,
I know
you know,
Mary has some input on that, but we'll talk to her
yeah.
later.
So I just want to throw one thing out there for everybody really quickly.
Yeah.
So at the last city council meeting, the city, a developer requested an extension on a subdivision map where they want to build like 500 single family homes out here in southern Antioch. And the reason they requested that extension, which has now gone on for like 5 years, is because they can't get environmental clearances or their final permits. And I believe the reason for that, and I mentioned it at the city council meeting, is where they want to build these homes is on a historic natural gas and oil drilling site here in Antioch. In the 60s, they were actively drilling off of this property, And where their planned development is, they actually have a home going in over that capped well. There's still a well down there, a pipe that goes all the way down to the natural gas, and they just capped it and filled it with cement. And now they want to build a home on top of it.
Hmm.
And there's multiple wells throughout it. And I'm wondering, first off, why a developer should be allowed to build where they were drilling natural gas and oil. Second off, there's never anything that ever comes out when that home is finally sold down the road. There's no notice given to the homeowner. So does a traditional homeowner go back and do due diligence and go to a council meeting from 10 years before when this map was drawn and hear about these things? And if it's a huge concern, which I believe it is, why did the city council hear these things and then not even question it? They just approved it without any questions. So would you guys feel comfortable with your house being built on top of a well where they were drilling natural gas for over 20 years?
Heck no.
No, no, and unfortunately, a lot of the development around the state has issues like that. Like I saw an article where DDT, the famous, I think, herbicide that became famous because it was killing birds, because I think it affected the eggs and they weren't able to hatch. It was causing a lot of environmental issues. The company that was active creating it dumped barrels, and I'm talking about thousands of barrels, off of the Southern California coast. And
Oh,
after
wow.
a few years, all those barrels get corroded, and slowly it's leaking into the ocean. So there's a higher rate of cancer in a lot of marine life. So yeah, I think a lot of the fumes that, like how Miss Patty said, they're gonna affect us, and it could manifest in many ways. Higher cancer rates, more allergies. Maybe mental illnesses, and a lot of it can be attributed to that disconnect with the natural world. And I think the most unnatural thing a species can do is create waste that can't be recycled, which ties us back to the whole recycling. Everything in nature is designed to recycle. Like, something will decompose something and put it back into the market of nutrients that are accessible, except humans, the smartest species in the world, who's slowly destroying their own environment. And just kind of to answer some comments that I've seen Mary, but so a lot of the marshland that we see today, like when I go to the Delta, I'm like, this is pretty massive. There's a lot of things going on. There's less than 5% of the original marshes of California. That's almost completely gone.
Wow.
So try to imagine all the birds, all the fishes, all the plants, that were edible and useful, that are completely gone. And in terms of like the pollution credits and mitigation, if you want to know more about how that process goes, it's the CEQA Act. It's the
Hmm.
California Environmental Quality. Let me check that again.
No,
It's
that's
the
right. Yeah.
California Environmental Quality Act. Yeah, and it'll talk more about the process of making an environmental report. All developers and agencies that want to do something, like build something, have to do this. And surprisingly, it was created by Ronald Reagan when he was a senator. But yeah, it kind of seems like it's an illusion of a solution, because if they want to do it, it'll take years, it'll take money. But if they want to develop something, they could just do that mitigation aspect of it, and in some cases it's necessary. Like I saw another comment that said that the Spanish were the ones that kind of in the gold rush made the changes. The Spanish didn't really, well, they probably knew, but the gold rush didn't happen until after the Mexican American War. So it was like 2 years after the US took over Mexico from the mixed natives and Spanish that were living there. And it wasn't until then that really big changes happened. uh, Prohibition of fire, which was a natural land stewardship that natives used, was prohibited. And the government actually would pay you money for every Indian scalp that was brought. So there was a lot of genocide and destruction of the environment. So all those marshes were wiped down to create all of our farmland in Central Valley that makes California one of the most thriving economic states in the world, really, because of how much we produce thanks to those destroyed marshlands. And sadly, we're kind of depleting our groundwater as we excessively farm things that are not sustainable, in my opinion, because there's so many foods that are adapted to not a lot of water that can be eaten. A lot of the foods that we eat, it's like only 6 things, like mainly corn, tomatoes, and all of those are actually native to America, but there's thousands of edible foods that we're really just sleeping on because we don't see it at our stores. They could be more nutritional even, but anyway, I digress.
Love, lots of knowledge. Yes. We are really lucky, and it sucks that at the cost of destroying the marshes, yeah, we do have a whole lot of fruits and vegetables. And the cherry season is coming. I believe it's in April, so community can go out there and get these cherry picking on.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, to kind of what Ricardo was saying, that's just looking at the Northern California and Central California region, right? Like if you start to look at like Imperial Valley and Salton Sea and what was done out there when they diverted the Colorado River in the early 1900s, right? They thought that they created this paradise in the early 50s and the 60s, and that's where everybody was going and vacationing, right? But now the salinity levels out there in the water, the algae that's out there. I mean, the government is literally dropping hundreds of millions of, if not now billions of dollars into trying to find solutions, as we should, right? As we should, but at what cost, right? That was some greedy, mass landowners in the early 1900s that said, hey, we bought land which wasn't ours, once again, in Imperial Valley for pennies on the dollar. And now we want to bring water here because there's no water. And so we keep trying to find solutions where, I think we need to move into a space where we're saying to ourselves, hey, why do we need solutions? Maybe we shouldn't be here. Maybe there shouldn't be these questions that maybe we're asking the wrong questions. So
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, if you've ever seen that meme where it's someone riding a bicycle and they stick the stick themselves on the bike wheel and they fall. That's kind of like where we're at. We're like, we created all of these, we did all these things in the past, and now we have all these problems. I don't know what happened. That's kind of what it is.
yeah, I mean, if you look at like Los Angeles in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 20s, 30s, 40s, all the oil derricks and rigs that were out there, and in Malibu and Manhattan Beach and all of that area, Long Beach, like people would just be flabbergasted. But now what is there? All of these single family homes sitting on top of all this land where we literally drilled down thousands of feet into the ground and broke through layers that were put there for a reason. Like Ricardo said, the earth does everything for a reason. So if we're capping these gases at this level, this is the earth saying this is how it's protecting its itself, right? And we breach it, and then we throw some sort of a man-made cap on it, which, once again, to Ricardo's point, these elements are only good for so long. So even if that cement has got a 200-year lifespan, it's kind of crazy to think that the people that did it said, we're only protecting people for the next 200 years. So
yeah, we need to think of things long-term. Long-term solutions matter. I wish we could deploy all of our military aircraft and go do a massive cleanup into our oceans. One day, maybe they could just put a big net and trap everything that's in the.
Did you see that one that was going through the ocean? That big, do you know more about that, Ricardo? that big project they did, that ocean cleaning project. It was like a giant net kind of tube thing that they were pulling out to sea. I think they
I've
even
heard
took it from
something
He
like
here.
started it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I know there's a project in Antioch that I just remembered. It's a desalination plant. I don't know if y'all heard
Yes.
about it. It's taking that brackish water that Patty mentioned in the beginning, where it's slightly salty because of the fresh and ocean water mixing. They're taking the water and making it fresh, which is, I think, a good project to do. And it's almost done, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
And
I think they're just
that'll
finishing
make
it.
our water more. I think we could drink out of it. It's safe to drink. That's how. If we were in Los Angeles, maybe not so much. So we are really lucky to have
Yeah,
these systems in place.
I think they even they're piping the the excess whatever the waste, they're piping that out to Delta Diablo sanitation plant where that's going to get processed too. So I mean it's pretty amazing. And I think that speaks to the state's level. We always hear that the state is overtaxing or is over ambitious, but and I'm not saying that the state definitely doesn't have its downfalls, but I am happy that we at least are bringing state resources to these local levels, because alone Antioch would have never been able to do something ambitious like that, but now it could be a pilot for other communities.
I love it. With that, I just got a message from Frank. There was an accident in Antioch. He won't be able to jump on, but in the future, hopefully he can jump on the conversation because he knows a lot about tribal lands and different policies and the fight between having developments and keeping things preserved, keeping certain parts of our community preserved. So with that, I want to thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ricardo. I learned a lot tonight, and I'm sure our folks watching did as well. Let's remember to get in the habit or just start learning about the different kinds of separating our garbage. Try to not put plastics in the landfill because that'll take forever for our lands to process. So it's better that we recycle them and reuse them, and they can, do what they need to do. Any closing remarks, Andrew, Ricardo?
Yeah, I mean, just thank you for inviting me. And another thing, if you want to get more informed, especially about current Native activists, check out Sogorea Land Trust. It's a really neat organization that's doing a lot of big stuff in the area. And there's also a hike in Martinez. If you go to the John Muir Land Trust website, you could sign up. I'll be helping out with that walk. And there will be some in April and May if you want to learn about the wildflowers and their ecological role in their hills. That would be something, a cool opportunity. But yeah, thanks for having me. It was a cool conversation.
Real quick, we got some recycle details by Miss Mary. Go on.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Andrew.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I just wanted to say that it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting you, Ricardo. I appreciate everything that you do for our community and for our environment. It's rewarding in these urban communities, right? When these concrete jungles, right? We look at urban sprawl, and it really just breaks your heart, especially if you live on the fringes. I myself am up here in southern Antioch, close to the Mount Diablo Range, and so we get wildlife that comes in, and it's really heartbreaking when you hear community members that are affronted by the coyote that comes in, or the mountain lion that comes in, and they're concerned for their community. Once again, we're taking this space that was occupied for so long by others, animals, humans. And I appreciate these forums and these spaces. And for John Muir Land Trust, also, literally one of the most pivotal organizations here regionally. We literally had a development in Antioch that was going to bring, it was a small developer that wanted to do like 35 homes. And I believe it was through John Muir Land Trust. They actually acquired that land and got that property before entitlements or after entitlements had been submitted. So right before the ground was going to start breaking for these homes, we see these conservations that come in and stop these developments and protect those ridge lines. And it doesn't make the news, right? It doesn't. It's in some article that really only the concern typically end up reading. And so with that, I'll digress because Mary's back on, but I appreciate everyone here. Thank you, Carlos. And
we appreciate you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. Mary.
I have no idea that you guys heard out. Hopefully you didn't hear me cussing at the screen.
No,
We
you're
did.
good.
We heard everything, Mary.
So what I was saying is that Republic Services, that we only have specific kinds of plastics that we're capable of recycling. That the rest of the recycling, if it's not cleaned, it doesn't get sorted. They just put it in the dump. So what they're doing with the cleaned ones is they're separating it by the class of recycling plastics that they are. And they're sending it to other facilities, most of them which are overseas. So they're shipping, so they're making it's even worse than just not using plastic at all. So instead of using plastic, Patty, hold up your bottle. Good job, Andrew. Single-use items, cut it out. Don't use them. Use the ones that you can continually use. Lastly, the food waste is creating methane in the dumps.
Mhm.
So if you're not separating your food waste and putting it in your green recycling, you're helping create methane. And methane is a gas that burns quicker than carbon dioxide does, but it also sits up at the top of our ozone layer. And it's creating a greenhouse effect, which is heating up our planet. If our planet heats 2 more degrees, life as we know it will no longer exist.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Gee.
So sorry, I
Yeah.
got a little passionate there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. That was a great closeout, Mary. Knowledge. We should do this again.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the music playing.
All
So
right.
with that, we want to thank everybody that stayed and watched the show, and all you guys for coming on the show and talking such, awesome knowledge. I didn't know half this stuff, and everybody out there, like, subscribe to the channel, share, tell a friend. We're here every Thursday, Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Let's be kind to Mother Earth, you guys. We gotta it's you can see change, and we need to go back to our roots and treat the earth like it's supposed to be treated, but we live in a fast-paced world now, so but with that,
Amen.
thank you all for being on the show. Miss Patty, give you some last words. You want to say something real quick?
No, thank you for providing this space always, and allowing
No
us to just keep
problem.
learning from each other and keep building the community, to share info along and to make our community a better place for everybody.
That's right. And with that,
Thank
we're
you.
out of here. Peace.